Look, 80 words. Imagine a world where your smartphone, your car, even your military drones are all held hostage by a single industry. That industry is semiconductors, and in 2026, it's the battleground of the century. The United States and China are locked in a high-stakes war, not with bullets, but with chips. One wrong move, and entire economies could collapse. So, how did we get here? And more importantly, who is winning? Stick around, because today, we're diving deep into the chip war of 2026, where the future of technology, and maybe even global power, is being decided right now. INTRO 120 words. Welcome back to the channel, where we break down the hardest-hitting stories in tech geopolitics. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because this is the only place you'll get the unfiltered truth about the semiconductor showdown between the US and China. Now, why are chips so important? Because they're the brains of every modern device. From AI to missiles, whoever controls the most advanced semiconductors controls the future. And right now, the US is doing everything it can to keep China from catching up. But China isn't sitting idle. They're pouring billions into their own chip industry, and the results are starting to show. So, let us break this down. First, we'll look at the US's latest moves to strangle China's tech ambitions. Then, we'll explore China's counterattack. And finally, we'll see how companies like TSMC and NVIDIA are caught in the crossfire. Let us get into it. Part 1, 280 words. The US has been tightening the screws on China's semiconductor industry for years, but in 2026, the restrictions have reached unprecedented levels. The latest round of sanctions, announced in early 2026, targets not just Chinese companies, but any foreign firm that dares to supply them with advanced chip-making equipment. The message is clear: if you help China build its own semiconductor industry, you're cut off from the US market. And for companies like ASML, the Dutch firm that makes the world's most advanced lithography machines, that's a deal-breaker. ASML's extreme ultraviolet (EUV) machines are essential for making cutting-edge chips, and the US has banned their export to China since 2022. But now, even older deep ultraviolet (DUV) machines are under scrutiny. Why? Because China has found ways to use them to produce chips that are just 1 or 2 generations behind the latest tech. And in a world where even a slight edge in processing power can mean the difference between victory and defeat, that's a problem. But the US isn't stopping there. In 2026, the Biden administration expanded the Entity List, a blacklist of companies that US firms can't do business with. The list now includes dozens of Chinese chipmakers, from industry giants like SMIC to smaller players trying to break into the market. And it's not just about chips. The US is also targeting China's access to the software and talent needed to design them. Companies like Cadence and Synopsys, which provide the tools for chip design, are now under pressure to cut ties with Chinese clients. Even universities are feeling the heat, with the US restricting visas for Chinese students studying semiconductor-related fields. The goal? To slow China down at every possible turn. But is it working? Well, that brings us to Part 2. Part 2, 280 words. China's response to the US sanctions has been nothing short of aggressive. In 2026, Beijing is doubling down on its Made in China 2025 initiative, pouring over $150 billion into its semiconductor industry. And while the US is trying to cut China off from the global supply chain, China is doing everything it can to build its own. One of the biggest moves? The creation of a national semiconductor fund, which is now the largest of its kind in the world. This fund is backing everything from chip design startups to massive fabrication plants, or fabs, that can produce chips at scale. And it's working. In 2026, China's largest chipmaker, SMIC, announced that it had successfully produced a 7-nanometer chip, something many thought was impossible without access to ASML's EUV machines. How did they do it? By reverse engineering older DUV technology and pushing it to its limits. It's not as efficient as the latest chips from TSMC or Intel, but it's a start. And for China, that's enough. But China isn't just relying on its own resources. It's also turning to allies like Russia and Iran to bypass US sanctions. In 2026, reports emerged that China was importing chip-making equipment from Russia, which had been smuggled out of Europe before the war in Ukraine. It's a risky move, but it shows just how desperate China is to break free from US control. And then there's the talent war. China is offering massive incentives to attract semiconductor engineers from around the world, including the US. In 2026, the Chinese government launched a new program called 1000 Talents 2.0, which offers lucrative salaries, housing, and even citizenship to foreign experts willing to relocate. And it's paying off. Dozens of former Intel and TSMC employees have already made the jump, bringing their expertise to China's burgeoning chip industry. But perhaps the most controversial move is China's push into quantum computing. In 2026, China announced that it had made a major breakthrough in quantum chip technology, potentially leapfrogging the US in a field that could redefine computing as we know it. If true, this could be a game changer. But for now, it's still early days. So, with the US tightening its grip and China fighting back, where does that leave the rest of the world? That's what we'll explore in Part 3. Part 3, 280 words. The chip war isn't just a battle between the US and China, it's a global conflict with far-reaching consequences. And no company is feeling the heat more than TSMC, the Taiwanese chip giant that produces over 50% of the world's advanced semiconductors. In 2026, TSMC is caught in the middle of a geopolitical storm. On one hand, the US is pressuring the company to build more fabs on American soil, offering billions in subsidies to make it happen. On the other hand, China is warning Taiwan that any move to deepen ties with the US could have serious consequences. And with tensions in the Taiwan Strait at an all-time high, TSMC is walking a tightrope. In 2026, the company announced plans to build a new $40 billion fab in Arizona, but progress has been slow. Delays, cost overruns, and a shortage of skilled workers have plagued the project, raising questions about whether the US can ever truly reduce its reliance on Taiwanese chips. Then there's NVIDIA, the AI chip leader that has become a key player in the chip war. In 2026, the US banned the export of NVIDIA's most advanced AI chips to China, dealing a major blow to China's AI ambitions. But NVIDIA isn't taking this lying down. The company is now developing a new line of sanctions-proof chips, designed to comply with US export controls while still giving China access to cutting-edge technology. It's a risky strategy, but one that could pay off if the US eases its restrictions in the future. Meanwhile, China is pushing its own AI chipmakers, like Huawei's HiSilicon, to fill the gap. And while these chips aren't as powerful as NVIDIA's, they're getting better every year. But the real fallout from the chip war is economic. In 2026, global semiconductor shortages are worse than ever, with prices for basic chips skyrocketing. Automakers, smartphone manufacturers, and even military contractors are feeling the pinch. And with the US and China both hoarding chips for their own strategic needs, the rest of the world is left scrambling. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and the EU are now investing heavily in their own semiconductor industries, trying to reduce their dependence on the US and China. But with the chip war showing no signs of slowing down, the question is, can anyone afford to stay neutral? Climax, 200 words. So, what does all of this mean for the future? In 2026, the chip war is no longer just about technology, it's about survival. The US is betting that its sanctions will cripple China's tech industry, forcing Beijing to the negotiating table. But China is betting that it can outlast the US, building its own semiconductor ecosystem from the ground up. And if it succeeds, the balance of power could shift forever. Imagine a world where China controls the most advanced chips, where its AI systems outperform those of the US, and where its military has access to technology that America can only dream of. That's the nightmare scenario for Washington. But it's not just about military power. The chip war is also reshaping the global economy. In 2026, supply chains are more fragmented than ever, with countries forced to choose sides. And as the US and China decouple, the cost of doing business is skyrocketing. Companies are being forced to duplicate their supply chains, building separate production lines for the US and Chinese markets. And consumers are paying the price, with higher costs for everything from cars to smartphones. But perhaps the most worrying aspect of the chip war is the risk of escalation. In 2026, the US and China are engaged in a dangerous game of brinkmanship, with each side testing the other's limits. And with Taiwan's semiconductor industry at the center of the conflict, the stakes couldn't be higher. One wrong move, and the chip war could turn into something far more destructive. So, who's winning? Right now, it's South too close to call. But one thing is certain, the chip war is far from over. Conclusion, 120 words. The chip war of 2026 is a battle for the future. The US is using every tool at its disposal to maintain its tech lead, while China is fighting tooth and nail to break free from American control. And with companies like TSMC and NVIDIA caught in the crossfire, the global semiconductor industry is in chaos. But here's the thing, this isn't just about chips. It's about power. Whoever controls the most advanced semiconductors will control the next century. And right now, the US and China are locked in a race to the top. So, what do you think? Will the US maintain its lead, or will China pull off a miracle? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world of tech geopolitics. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. CTA, 60 words. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to smash the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the tech wars shaping our world. And if you want to stay ahead of the curve, check out our other videos on the semiconductor industry and the future of AI. What is your take on the chip war? Let us discuss in the comments below.